Hi, it's Frenchie. You're listening to Frenchie's Reviews, and it's time for what I consider to be the 10 most disappointing albums of 2017. Now, before I even get started on this, it comes with a bit of a disclaimer. So, this isn't a list of the 10 objectively worst albums of 2017. Now, and there is a difference. So, for example, if you think of the albums which have got the most flack and bad criticism this year, think of the new U2 album, Linkin Park, Nickelback, Chris Brown, albums like these. I don't purposely go out of my way to listen to bad music, especially if it's getting horrible reviews or if it's, by an artist that I already know I don't like. I already know I'm not a fan of Nickelback, for example, so I'm not going to purposely go out and listen to their music. Even as a reviewer, it doesn't interest me. So there might be much worse albums released this year that don't make it onto my list. But these are a list of albums by artists I've had an interest in, or I feel like they've released good material in the past. There must be some sort of expectation that these albums might have been good and they've just fallen way off the mark. So hopefully that makes sense. Incidentally, I think the worst album, maybe the worst album I've stumbled across this year is the new Midger orchestral album. If you want to hear some really bad shit, God, don't listen to it. We kick things off with the new Electric Wizard album. I've already talked at great length about how bad the album sleeve is, but damn, Electric Wizard, they've really reached a new low with Wizard, Bloody Wizard. This is a band I think have made some great material in the past, and they are one of the quintessential doom metal bands. But things have been taking a slippery slope. They made the classic album Dope Throne in 2000, and things have been fairly good since then. Like, I really enjoyed Witch Cult Today, but definitely since that point, things have took a tumble into mediocrity for Electric Wizard. And the problem I have with them is I feel like they're just not putting the effort in like they used to. And this album in particular, they've really hit rock bottom for me. It's the doom metal equivalent of Cat Sat on the Mat. It's their softest album, but also there's just a real lack of ideas and motivation to make anything striking. It's basically just the blues scale with heavy fuzz, and it's not even anywhere near as heavy as their older albums, and it doesn't have as much variety or just anything new or fresh or interesting to say. It feels like they've just knocked this out in an afternoon, and I don't feel any motivation to make this album other than the record label saying, oh, maybe it's about time you made a new album. Here's some money. Let's get you on tour. That's it. Yeah, this is a really disappointing experience. More of like a heavy rock album. I guess if you've never heard Electric Wizard before, you could enjoy this album. But if you've been a long time follower of this band, this is just not worth your time. Recycling old ideas to the point where it's just vapid and empty and soulless. And in a much similar realm, we have, sadly, the latest Mogwai album. I think Mogwai are a fantastic band, especially live. I think their 90s and 2000s material is very strong. One of the essential bands of the post-rock movement and one of the pioneers of that style. But since 2010, they've had to put out some kind of new release every year this decade, whether it's a new album, an EP, remixes, a soundtrack. They've been a much more busy band. I don't feel like that's benefited them at all because they're just not producing anything striking or interesting anymore. Really, I think this is their worst album in their entire discography because it's just so by the numbers. They've oversaturated their own music to the point where Nothing about this sounds fresh or innovating. It was quite a boring and unpleasant listen for me. This band is capable of great things, but putting out material so frequently is just stagnating Mogwai. Post-rock is not in a good place as a whole. Many of the pioneers are not putting out any of their best material, or they've sort of changed it up or gone on hiatus. It's not a good time for new post-rock bands to be making material. You know, apart from Godspeed You Black Emperor, I think they've still very much got it. They're putting out really interesting material, and I think one of the keys to their success is they take their time between albums. I think Mogwai still have potential to make great material. They just need to slow it down and focus more rather than just banging shit out every year. Just take a break, you know, come up with something more fresh. Think of more varied ideas, but you won't find that here. But yeah, Every Country's Son, big disappointment for me. I'm tired of this shit now. Like, come up with something different. This is just post-rock 101, cliche, by the numbers, not exciting. Now, I'm a fan of indie rock music, especially American indie rock music. I feel like Arcade Fire have been one of the most positive and innovative bands from the 2000s onward. Their past double album, Reflector, wasn't massively well received, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like they took a risk going into more electronic, dance-oriented and funky music, and I think it worked for them. With Everything Now, they've sort of tried to continue that dancier, more funky electronic version of Arcade Fire's sound. They've gone for a much more poppy, commercial sound, and unfortunately for me, it just sounds like they've really dumbed down their sound. Like, I don't feel like they're writing music for their original fan base anymore. It feels like they've been listening to Coldplay. Like, I enjoyed some of the tracks on this album, and there were parts of it which did have the lush, dense, lavish production, but there are some tracks on here that just painfully underwritten, so badly written they barely pass into my consciousness. They're that bad. Like, Infinite Content, wow, that is just a doozy. For the first time, they've really just dropped the ball. Like, they're writing some good songs, but they're also writing some terrible songs that should never have made it onto this album. Like, I feel like there's almost nothing here that would appeal to fans of Funeral and Neon Bible. This is the first album Arcade Fire have released that has been super underwhelming. This is not a good direction for them to go in. Now, this one I'm going to take some flack for, but did not dig the new Wolves in the Throne Room record. It actually got a lot of positive reviews. For me, I could not get into this album, and I tried. I listened to it a lot, and I actually found myself disliking it more the more I listened to it. Few things for me that stopped me from enjoying this album. The mix is terrible. It's very flat. The album opens with acoustic guitars, and then when the heavy, distorted electric guitars kick in, they actually sound quieter than the acoustic guitars. I don't even know how someone manages that. It's good for a band to try out new sounds and ideas. That's fine. This album sounds like Norwegian black metal. Bits of it reminded me of like Satyricon, even Mayhem. Like, the reason I listen to Wolves in the Throne Room is because they don't sound like Norwegian black metal. They were one of the bands that carved out American black metal. They said, we're going to do something totally different. We're going to have our own unique sound that's different to, you know, the pioneering bands like Emperor and Burzum and Mayhem. And that was their USP for me, and I felt like they went on and perfected that. I love their first 3 albums, especially Two Hunters. I consider that to be my favourite black metal album of all time still. This album just didn't do it for me. It's not a terrible album. You know, there's some interesting ideas, there's some interesting parts in the songs, But as a whole, I just think it was a really misguided effort. And another interesting thing is, I think just a week after this, Merker released her new album, which has the same producer and the same drummer. It's way better. It's a way more interesting album. The sound palette on it was much more what I wanted to hear. With the two albums coming out so close, I think Wolves in the Throne Room got left in the dust for me, and I listened to the Merker album much more and enjoyed it more, so it fell really flat for me. I'm really sad to say it, especially from one of my favourite bands in the genre. Normally Weezer releasing a bad album would not be anything disappointment or unexpected. You know, their first two albums, absolute classics. They've done some good singles after that, but their 2000s work onwards it's really just been a downward spiral of mediocrity. But they've sort of brought it back recently. I thought 2016's The White Album, I loved that album. I thought, damn, this is like the best material they've put out since Pinkerton by far. So with Weezer announcing a new album just a year after that, I thought I really want them to carry on that momentum and make another great album. And damn, this one sucked hard. The problem with this album is it's so bland, it's so mediocre, right down to the mix, the songs, the performance. It doesn't just sound like the B-sides of the White Album, it sounds like the Z-sides. I'm starting to think the White Album was just a one-off fluke, and now they're going to go back to purely uninspired, unimaginative material. I really hope it's not true. I want them to make another good album again, but this fell so flat for me. This was not what I wanted. So this might seem like an odd choice, but I'm not even going to pretend to lie. I thought Taylor Swift's 1989 album was great. It's definitely the best pop album I've heard all decade. I'm not the biggest pop music fan, but damn, I listened to the shit out of that album. I thought it was great. The production was sharp. Taylor's voice sounded great. And I think she really fit into the new style of moving away from country music into pure sort of synth electro pop with a bit of trap influence. So I expected her next album to carry on the flame and take that even further. But sadly, this was a poor album. Like, I liked a few songs on it. Like, really just 2 or 3 songs. The main problem with Reputation is it sounds very dated. Now, I know 1989 had sort of an 80s throwback thing going on, but it still sounded very current when it came out, and it still sounds current today. Reputation, it's got dubstep breaks on it. Why? Dubstep breaks would have sounded old hat in 2012. Should be nowhere near a cutting-edge 2017 pop album. Like, damn. And they're frequently cropping up on this album. But even the more trap-influenced synthy pop tracks on here just don't hold a candle to any of the tracks on 1989. Even though she's worked with the same producer and songwriter Max Martins, the magic that happened on 1989 is just not translating for me on this album. I don't find Taylor Swift to be the most interesting or exciting person out there, but she does a good job. I think she's got a sweet voice. She's got some sort of quirky, bouncy lyrics. But I think Max Martins might have dropped the ball on this album because, you know, he's done some writing and production on the new Katy Perry album, Lana Del Rey, and he's got more interesting results out of those albums. And I feel like he's brought weaker material to the table on Reputation. This is an album I will quickly forget. I need to set the bar straight on this choice. Mark Kozelek, I think he's one of my all-time favourite rock and folk songwriters. Justin Broderick of Godflesh, Jesu, Techno Animal fame is a huge inspiration for me. I think he's one of the most consistent, hardworking, and innovative producers of really hard electronic, industrial, and metal music. One of the hardest working musicians out there. So Justin Broderick and Mark Kozelek did an unlikely collaboration last year, and I thought that was a really good album. It combined sort of Jesus shoegazy riffs, Mark Kozelek, new kind of spoken word, long ranting stream of consciousness style of vocals and lyrics, and I thought it was a good pairing, surprisingly. There was, more than enough expectation for them to deliver that again. But with this album, Justin Broderick's bringing his laziest, most unimaginative electronic beats I've ever heard from him. But Mark Kozelek, he already dropped a Sun Kill Moon double album in January of this year. And this thing came out in like April or May. And I was already trying to decipher this really complex double album of long ranting, spoken words. Mark Kozelek basically just ranting, listing everything he's got up to with his girlfriend on tour, blurting out all his thoughts, he's had in the last few months. And I didn't need to hear that again so soon. This is a 70-minute album. It repeats a lot of ideas and thoughts and lyrical themes that he's already expressed on numerous previous albums. It just doesn't sound as interesting or fresh without the Jizu heavy guitars that were on the previous collaboration. This one's much more sparse, stripped down, has a lot of sort of low-key electronic beats with Mark talking and talking and talking over the top, and it just didn't work for me. In particular, track 2 is 18 minutes long, and it has about 2 ideas in the whole song. It just overstays its welcome so bad. Who puts an 18-minute kind of droning track as the second track on their album? Just killed the flow of the album so early on. Another terrible, terrible track is, there's a track called He's Bad, and it's about Michael Jackson being about how, hey, we hate Michael Jackson because he was a kiddie fiddler. Probably. Is this really what we want to hear in lyrics in 2017? You're so late to the party. And even the chorus goes, he's bad, he's dead and I'm glad. It's so in such poor taste, and it's just so late to the party. Like, why is this even a song topic in 2017? Mark Kozelek has put out 4 albums this year, and 2 of those have been double albums that have been like nearly an hour and a half long. This album's 70 minutes long. I hate to say this, but I love Justin Broderick, love Mark Kozelek, but this is the worst thing either of them have put out in their entire discography. I hear they're not doing another collaborative album, and based on this album, I think that's the right move. Sad to say. I live in Manchester. I grew up as an Oasis fan. Liam Gallagher's dropped his very first solo album, but to be honest, you could just as easily put the new Noel Gallagher album in this spot. It wouldn't make any difference. Both of these artists have come out with the most unimaginative, terrible, and uninspired music they've ever created. And damn, I listened to that first BDI album. That was bad. Liam's album was slightly worse, and the main problem with it is, goddamn, he likes to remind people that he likes the Beatles. I mean, that's already been something that's very prevalent in the Oasis music canon, but goddamn, there's so many lyrics here that name check the Beatles, going on about Helter Skelters, and outside of that, there are some terrible lyrics in this album. There's a lyric in the song Chinatown that says, happiness is still a warm gun. What is it to be a free man? What's a European? Just flat out terrible lyrics. And the lyrics aren't even the worst thing about this album, although they are very bad. But you know how like Liam and Noel, whenever you watch interviews of them, they love to come across as so edgy. They feel like they're the bad boys. They're rock and roll. But This album is so bland and so overproduced that it sounds like every possible edge has been sanded off vigorously. Liam Gallagher's voice does not sound real on this album. It sounds like he's gone through an auto-tune filter on every track. And case in point, if you watch any live videos of him performing these tracks live, they sound better, they sound rawer, and his voice actually has that gravelly, snarling tone that we're used to hearing. It's like that's one of Liam's biggest characteristics as a vocalist, and it's like they just smoothed off every vocal performance he did here. That sounds worse. I'd rather hear the rough edge on Liam's voice because it worked fine on all the Oasis albums, so why get rid of that? Damn. And as for the Noel Gallagher album, it's a bit more varied in production and sound, but so unimaginative. He's ripping off the Beatles as well. There's a track on there that verbatim sounds like Come Together. It's not just, oh, it sounds vaguely similar. It is a straight rip-off. Liam and Noel Gallagher, they're ripping off other bands. It's tiresome. It's like, goddamn, just write a good song. Write an original piece of music for once in your life. Yeah, throw both of them in there. Throw both of them in here, because damn, this is a new low even for them. Like, God. Now, if you happen to be one of the 3 people who regularly follow my written reviews, you'll probably know this one was going to make it onto the list because I gave it a scathing 2 out of 10 review. It's the new CKY album, The Phoenix. I'm not going to lie, I freaking loved CKY when I was a teenager. Jackass was my favourite show. I went out and got their albums and I loved them. Like, and I can still go back to those albums and have a positive nostalgia hit. But CKY in 2017, wow, this is bad. So weak, so bland, so horribly written. The production on this album is horrible. The mix in particular, it hurt my ears listening to this album. They want to do loads of flashy guitar solos on nearly every track. And solos that go on for like over a minute. What? Why does this CKY song need a 2-minute long guitar solo? It's not like I have anything wrong with guitar solos, but they're so tacked on. They don't even have a reason to be there. It's just like, oh, we couldn't think of a way to finish this song, so let's just have loads of guitar solo in it and fade out. It's so lazy. The way these guitar solos have been mixed, it's ear piercing, like pierced my ears, sounded horrible, just and the big talking point is their regular vocalist Darren Miller, he's left the band, and Chad Ginsburg has taken the lead vocal role instead. And did he even listen to himself like before he recorded these tracks? Because he doesn't have a pleasant voice. I feel harsh saying that, but he generally sounds like he's drunk off his ass. He's just slurring all over. This is a really weak effort. Very, very underbaked. They should have stuck this one in the oven a lot longer. And now for my number 1 most disappointing album of the year. It's Triplicate by Bob Dylan. I like Bob Dylan, especially his 60s and 70s work, almost untouchable. When you think of Bob Dylan, there's a few things that come to mind. 1, great lyricist. 2, folky guitar player. And 3, voice that sounds like a motorbike revving up. Bob Dylan, he's really getting on now. He's made 270 albums, but even still, I enjoyed even some of his more recent material. He had a few good 90s albums. From this decade, he put out an album called The Tempest. That was a really good album. Even though his voice sounded really aged, he made the music to suit his voice. And his last 2 albums, they've deviated from 2 of the things he does best. 1, he's not writing his own lyrics anymore. His last 2 albums have been Frank Sinatra covers albums, and 2, he's not playing the guitar anymore. He's switched to like piano, and he even does this in his live sets recently, which have got pretty disappointing reviews, and I've heard people say his voice has gone so gruff and monotonous that it's hard to even pick out those lyrics when you see him live anymore. Bearing that in mind, in 2017, Bob Dylan thinks acceptable to drop a triple album where he doesn't play guitar, he doesn't write his own lyric, and his voice sounds like a rusty chainsaw. Yeah, I gave this album a spin because I like Bob Dylan. I'm open-minded, didn't enjoy his last 2 albums. Dylan taking on the Great American Songbook, so it's all cover songs, and whoo, this was pure torture. I managed to listen to the whole album once, and it was painful to sit through. It was so monotonous. All the things you look for in a good Bob Dylan album are just completely absent here. This droning, mangled voice over these boring, sappy, easy listening, bad crooner shit. One disc of this would have been bad, but 3 discs, nearly 2 hours of music. This is the worst thing I've ever heard from Bob Dylan by a country mile. I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know how anyone even let him release this. I think it's just got to that point where he has such a dedicated fan base, he could put anything out and they'll swallow it up. But damn, this is a new low. Like, this is so bad that, you know, even though he's a legendary musician and lyricist, I hear this album and I think, damn, you need to retire. You need to retire quickly. Ugh. This for me is a guttingly bad album because it's come from an artist who has many classic albums and songs to his name. One of the most influential, legendary recording artists of the last 50 years. And now he's reached this nadir. This is absolute torture. Absolute torture. Damn. Well, thank you for listening to me drone on about what albums disappointed me the most. If you managed to survive this long list, let me know. What were your most disappointing albums? What did you think of my choices? Do you want to fight me? If you don't want to fight me, please like, subscribe. More content on the way. Thanks for tuning in.